Hey everybody, I wanted to come to you guys with a different type of video. Usually I'm commentating on somebody else's life and somebody else's business, and I suppose that's what I'm going to do a little bit now, but it's a little different. I'm looking at this video differently, and I'm looking at it as more of hopefully self-help, self-love, just, something that hopefully can help somebody. As you know, it's been a little over a week now since the tragic passing of Kobe Bryant, Gigi Bryant, as well as several others. 7 other people lost their lives as well. We cannot forget that, all right? There's a lot of families out there grieving over the loss of those people. And, the truth of the matter is people die every day, right? And somebody's grieving somewhere. So I hope that somewhere, somehow, this will help somebody. So a few days ago, the Lakers played. They were back on the court after taking off a game or so, I should have said. And they honored Kobe Bryant as well as Gigi. And Vanessa posted this. She said, "There is no number 24 without number 2. All right. She posted that. She was not at the game, but she posted that. Now, prior to this, she also put out a statement, which I think was probably more a PR, created statement, which would be perfectly understandable, right? But she did put out a statement a few days prior to this game. All right. And she also posted another picture. She changed her AV on her Instagram. And she also posted another picture of her daughter, Gigi. She said, "Seeing my baby girl smile and happy again with a basketball under her arm, wrapped in love, just warmed my heart. Thank you for this. Thank you, my Gigi." Now, when she posted this, naturally, the blogs picked it up. And I was looking at the comments, and while most comments were still full of love and still praying for her, I saw some comments along the lines of, "How is she posting? I don't understand how she's posting. I wouldn't be posting after that happened to me." And I'm just thinking to myself, just a few days ago, everybody was praying for her strength. And the minute she shows strength, you are questioning her strength. Didn't you just pray for her strength? If you prayed for it and she's showing strength because we prayed for it, isn't that what you want to see? That she was able to muster up enough strength to show her daughter and show the dedication to her daughter and to her husband in the midst of such tragedy. That's not easy for anybody, but the fact that she was able to do that showed that the prayers were answered. So my question for anybody, don't question, or my answer to that is, don't ever question that. If you are praying for someone's strength, don't let it be a hollow thing to say just because someone died. A lot of times people will jump under somebody's comments when somebody died, like, "Oh, I'm praying for you, girl. I'm praying for you. Prayers up, keeping you in my prayers." And don't even pray shit. Don't even pray. Don't pray to God for nothing. And it's hollow. So if you are praying for someone's strength, do it. Do it. And I'm thinking that because so many people were praying for her and lifting her up, she was able to do that in the midst of such a tragedy as this. Now, when I look at what has happened, obviously, in any type of death situation, you know that shortly after someone dies, whether it be tragic or just natural cause, whatever it is, death, we are often surrounded by our loved ones, our family and our friends, and they're holding us up, and we rarely have a moment to ourselves. If you've ever experienced a death, usually people are surrounding you. It's just people in the house. You never really have a moment to yourself. So my guess is that Vanessa is surrounded by a lot of people, and she's surrounded by a lot of people who love her and who are trying to keep her up and hold her up in the midst of such a tragedy, as well as I'm sure those other families are being surrounded by their loved ones as well. This is, and I don't want to sound disrespectful, but this is kind of like the part where things are a bit more smooth, as crazy as it sounds, than they will be later. Because right now, it is possible that reality has not sinked in for her. And that goes for everybody. Usually when something happens and we're surrounded by so many people, eventually after the funeral, after the services, and people start to slowly disappear, that's when reality kicks in for people. So my guess is that things will start to get real after the crowds start to dissipate and people start to go away. And it's just Vanessa and her 3 living daughters left to try to figure out this life after Kobe, this life after Gigi. That is going to be difficult. I think that that's when the support really needs to kick in, and I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Sometimes we forget that grief doesn't have a time limit. There is no time limit on grief, and there is no right and wrong way to grieve. And that's kind of where I want to kind of move in that direction. Like I said, I don't really care I don't really like when people try to police someone's grief. I've seen it online when people say things like, well, how is it that how are you sad about somebody you've never met? How are people sitting here being so upset about Kobe Bryant dying? Well, and how are these guys out here crying over Kobe Bryant and the basketball players sitting there crying? Because Kobe was a public figure for over 20 years now. It's been about 20 years or so. He played in the NBA, but even prior to that, people knew him, right? Those boys coming up in the NBA right now, those rookies, those first year, second year, those guys grew up in the era of Kobe. So they know him. They're familiar with him. They may have not played with him, of course, but that doesn't mean that they can't feel something and they can't understand this loss. Please don't tell people how they should and shouldn't feel, or they shouldn't be crying, or shouldn't be upset. That's wrong. We should not ever question that and question someone's grief. Again, a lot of complete strangers broke down and cried because it's a tragic thing that happened. Even when I watch the news, which I try not to often, simply because, just seeing death every day I don't ever want to be desensitized to that. I just don't. But when I see things tragically happen, and things happen every day, guys, it makes us, even if we didn't know that person, our hearts go out to them if you have a heart. And you also start to question your own mortality, and you start thinking about your own life, or if your life was cut short tragically, what would happen to your kids? You start to think about that, and you connect to this person you've never met, and it does hurt. It's a hurting feeling. So, like I said, I just don't like the cynicism of, oh, well, why are you feeling that type of way? How could you feel sad? You don't even know him. Like, because I'm a human. Hello. But yeah, I think that Vanessa, as well as anybody else, is going to definitely need the support after the fact. Like, I think that because everything's been so public, I'm hoping that they could have something that's private for them and their family and their friends. But again, Kobe was a public figure, and that's just something that I'm sure that this family will have to figure out how they want to handle it, because I'm glad that this is turning more into a celebration of life than just the loss. I'm glad it's doing that. But I pray for all of those, and I pray for anybody who has lost anybody. I remember my father passed away in 2018, and I've had to deal with a sudden loss. It was a sudden loss. Literally, I went to the store, told him I was going to the store, came back, and he was dead. And I wasn't even gone an hour, and my father was gone. And I had to deal with that sudden loss and the fact that, my life would be completely different the day after, because my father lived with me, and how I wasn't able to grieve the way I guess I was in shock for a few days. So, because you're surrounded by people, and you guys know, if you've ever lost somebody, you're surrounded by people in and out of the house, They almost don't even, they stick close to you. It's almost like they don't want you to break down, right? And that's another thing. We should let people grieve. If somebody wants to cry, yell, scream, let them. We should not stifle them and stop them from that. They should be able to grieve and just let it out. All right. And again, don't police that. Don't police how somebody feels about that. I remember when my mother passed away in 2014, and she died, and I didn't go to the viewing. I told my father that I didn't want to go to the viewing. I didn't want to see my mother. Now, prior to that, I had already, the great thing about it, as hard as this is my mother and I talked about her death. We talked about this. Well, she told me, I didn't want to know, but she was like, well, when I die, I want to wear this color, and I want this on my tombstone, and I want your cousin so-and-so to sing so-and-so. And I was like, Mom, I don't want to hear that. But thank God she had the wherewithal to tell me that. And I was actually listening, because when she did pass away, which was sudden for me as well, I knew exactly what to do. Now, I didn't go to her viewing because I didn't want to see my mother. I didn't want to see her lying in that casket. I couldn't do it. And when the viewing came along that day, I'll never forget it, it was a Sunday, I took my daughter and we went to the movies. And I was getting all kinds of phone calls. I was getting texts. And it's like, why are you not here at the viewing? Why are you not here? How could you not be here? How could you leave your father? How could you? Now, I had already talked to my father, and he understood that why I couldn't go. I just didn't want to see my mother. I could not see my mother. I didn't see her when she died. I didn't want to see her like that. I just wanted to remember her the way I remembered her. And I didn't want to see her lying in there. I knew what she was wearing. I knew what the makeup. I had all that planned out to a T. But I didn't want to see my mother lying there. And I had people dogging me, coming at me. Family members was like, how could you not do that? How could you not be here at your mother's viewing? How could you not? And it's just, again, people trying to police how I should have handled my mother's death. Listen, that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with in my life. But that didn't mean that I wanted to see her lying in state. Now, when I had to go to the funeral the next day, which was the hardest trip I had to make, the longest trip I had to make, driving to my mother's funeral, I still did not lay eyes on my mother. I stayed in the back until they closed that casket. And still to this day, I never laid eyes on my mother, not one time. And I was okay with that. And I was at peace with that. And I wish that people would have understood that at the time. Now, some people came back and said, I'm sorry, I apologize, I shouldn't have said that. I understand now what you were going through. And that's why I'm like, just don't tell people how to handle certain situations. Don't. If you're going to be here for a person when somebody dies, be there for them in the way they need you to be there for them. But don't try to police and tell them how they should grieve, how they should handle things, what they should and shouldn't do, or assume that they're not hurting because they don't cry out like other people. They don't fall out on the floor or roll all over the casket. Don't assume that they're not hurting. That's a terrible assumption to make. That's an absolute terrible assumption to make. And again, don't assume that someone's not hurting because they're able to post about their loved one. Don't do that, because you don't know what is going on in that person's heart. You don't know. Grief shows up very differently for everybody. Grief has no time limit. Grief could pop up in the middle of a workday. When my mother passed, I was still teaching, and I remember breaking down in front of my classroom, my kids. My teaching assistant had to take over the class. I had to run out. It just hit me because all of a sudden I realized that I couldn't call my mother anymore. My mother's phone number is still in my phone. I'll never get rid of it. But that, you just don't know how it's going to hit somebody. So I'm just hoping that it'll help somebody today, what I'm talking about, and that you will allow yourself to grieve the way you need to. And if you've been through a tragic situation, you've lost a loved one, that you will allow yourself time to grieve the way you need to grieve. And even if you never shed a tear because other people want you to cry in front of them, that doesn't mean that you're not hurting. Because again, grief has no time limit, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It just comes when it wants to come. Because the reality is, you have to get used to a new reality. The realization that somebody that you love very dearly is no longer here. And that hits us at very different times. And so I will continue to pray my strength in the Lord for Vanessa Bryant, as well as her daughters, as well as everybody that was lost on that helicopter, as well as people that I don't even know. I'll pray for you anyway. And when we pray for somebody's strength, let this be a reminder, when we pray for somebody's strength and they show that they're being strong, don't question it because you prayed for it. Just let it ride, because that is exactly what you prayed for. So I'm going to leave you guys with that, and I'm hoping that this will touch somebody today and that you can get something from it, eat off of it, I hope. And I'm going to leave it at that, and I hope that I'll see you guys on the next video. Go ahead and do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. YouTube doesn't always monetize my videos, so please support the channel any way that you feel a like will do, all right? Or if you want to do any other way, please just subscribe, like, comment, and support. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Have a good day.